Hello and welcome to the Retro Hour, episode number 2. My name's Dan Wood.
And I'm Ravi Abbott.
And if you didn't catch the show last week, we're basically a brand new podcast that's going to be here every single Friday. We're getting released. Perfect little treat for the weekend, talking about all the biggest retro gaming and technology stories of the week. And we're aiming to have a special guest on most weeks as well. And it's a big one this week, isn't it, Ravi?
Yeah, I'm just going to say war's never been so much fun.
It is Jon Hare from Sensible Software who's going to be coming on talking about, obviously, all of those classic games that came out back in the 16-bit days. Cannon Fodder, Sensible Soccer, Megalomania, and also talking about this really interesting new project he's got on the go at the moment. Essentially, he's making a new game that's going to be cross-platform, and it's really the spiritual successor to Sensible Soccer, isn't it?
Well, I remember Sensible Soccer was known for years as the #1 football game. You know, it was the best way to play football, so if this comes back, it could be very interesting.
It's still got a scene now, Sensible Soccer, hasn't it?
Yeah, people are still updating it. It's crazy.
So Jon Hare on in about 35-40 minutes from now, but before that, should we go through the big news stories of the week?
Yeah, let's check out some stuff. And first, we're going to follow on from what we were talking about last week, which was old retro consoles. So these are consoles that can basically play the retro systems. You know, you can have your carts in there. Mm-hmm. Well, there's a new one that's been developed, and this is through Kickstarter, and it's called the Indigo. And this is basically a DVD drive with a Raspberry Pi 2 in there. And that's it. You know,
you can do anything on a Raspberry Pi, though, can't you?
Yeah, this system's designed for this kind of CD area. So we're moving on from the emulation of carts to the CD era. And this is Amiga Cd32, the Sony PlayStation, Sega Saturn, Sega CD, TurboGrafx, and more systems.
Now, looking at this, what it is essentially, it's a Raspberry Pi in a funky black box with a DVD-ROM drive in there, isn't it?
Yeah.
And a controller, but
and the HDMI out,
as a Raspberry Pi always does.
Yeah.
But the good thing about this is, I mean, if you can obviously build your own emulation system using a Raspberry Pi if you're technically minded and you can set it all. But looking at this, it says if you've got an original Amiga Cd32 or Sony PlayStation disc, you put it in and it will boot.
It would just play straight away, yeah. There's no finding the ROMs, all of this kind of transferring files over, you know. And
the thing is about the Raspberry Pi as well, I mean, it's such a versatile platform, and there's even that, the latest model of the Raspberry Pi, that one that was really cut down, I think it's meant to be dirt cheap, like £5. What's it called, the Raspberry Pi Zero? Yeah,
that was it, the Zero, and it was actually given away free on a magazine, which is insane.
That blew my mind. Now, this came out just before Christmas, didn't it?
Yeah.
And they've got an official Raspberry Pi magazine called Magpie. And yeah, they did actually cover mount the motherboard from a Raspberry Pi Zero, the latest model.
I went to find it in shops. There were other nerds, you could see them. They were looking for this magazine because they'd heard about it as well. And they were we were all searching for it, but they were sold out everywhere.
Couldn't get it for love nor money, could you?
No.
But I remember, because, obviously I've got a Raspberry Pi 1 and 2 anyway, but I thought if the fact that it's given away in a magazine, and, people of our era remember when you got a cover disc on the front of a magazine, and that was a big deal.
Even before that, you had the old floppy vinyl.
Yeah, I used to cut them out.
Vinyl.
I remember getting those on cereal boxes.
Yeah. And then cassettes, and then
when it came to like CD-ROMs, I was like, whoa.
Wow, DVDs.
Now you get a whole computer given away in the front of a mag. But that was actually kind of tragic in a way because, it's kind of like when that Amiga book came out last year.
I think people were hoarding it.
Yeah, people go in, they'll buy out the entire stock of W.H. Smith, whack them on eBay for like 20, 30 quid.
Yeah, mark it up,
Kind of tragic, really. But because the day when that magazine came out, I called around all the local Tesco's and... because it said it was stocked in Asda as well. Yeah. One of my local one, the guy's like, you're about the 10th person today who's asked about that, and no, we haven't got any in, I'm afraid. But
And it's kind of a crazy story, the kind of success of Raspberry Pi, because it was initially aimed, we had a computer called the BBC in the UK, which was...
Acorn, wasn't it?
Acorn, yeah, and that was distributed to all the schools, and we had this great program of, educating the kids on how to program. So they decided to redo this with this small Raspberry Pi. But then suddenly all these non-school kids were buying it and using it for crazy projects. So
it's essentially the ultimate hacker's machine, though, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. It's really good. And I've actually got an Arduino, which is kind of another hacking hardware device. And if you work that alongside the Raspberry Pi, you're invincible. You're unstoppable.
Ravi's been inhaling solder vapor all week, haven't you?
Yeah, that's it.
What is that device you've got then? Tell us a bit more about that.
So it's called the DIY Gamer Kit, and I got it for Christmas, and it's by a group called Technology Will Save Us, and it's basically like they're selling all these little kits that you can solder yourself and create your own little system. So they have a synthesizer as one of them.
Oh, wow.
This one's a gaming kit. There's loads on their shop. and you can kind of program your own games in. So this is a very simple handheld Game Boy style device. You can program Snake games in there, you know, and this is all soldering and using the hardware to do it. It's really good. You know, they've got a speaker kit as well and stuff.
I just love the fact that, I mean, you think of when home computers started, you know, here in the UK, it was like the ZX Spectrum and that, and even before that, it was like, I think the ZX80 you had to build yourself and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It was all kit computers, and it wasn't America with the Altair and that, but the fact that that kind of era of building your own kit and coding it from scratch, you know, is coming back.
Well, then it was a necessity. Now it's a luxury. People are building stuff for the joy of building it. Before, they didn't have it pre-assembled. They were, you know, trapped soldering.
But even go back to that Raspberry Pi project, the fact that you can now make your own little emulation station, and that is going to sell for 150 quid with a DVD-ROM drive in there, all set up for you, or you can download their software for 25 euros, I think they said.
And it's got Kodi in it as well, which was the Xbox Media Center before, so you can, you know, just use it to stream TV,
it's
1080p,
great though, yeah.
You know.
And stuff that other guys I've seen doing with like the Raspberry Pi, there's people that build like weather stations with it.
Oh yeah, lots of weather stations actually. I've seen those. Well, they've even made a handheld console like that, the Pi Boy.
Yeah.
Which is another one. Yeah.
So it's a brilliant platform, but yeah, this is, you know, one of the latest interesting uses from the Raspberry Pi. And moving on to old consoles that have been re-released, or old computers actually, the ZX Spectrum's back.
Ooh.
Now, you may have heard about this. It's basically a recreated ZX Spectrum. And did you watch Charlie Brooker's 2015 wipe on TV?
Yeah, I did actually, but I don't remember this being in there.
Well, there was one little scene where he's talking about watching TV and he goes, things you need. He's like, so I've got my bucket of popcorn, I've got my ZX Spectrum, and he held it up in the air.
Okay.
This is actually the...
Because he's an old classic gamer, isn't he?
He loves
Charlie
the Spectrum,
Brooker.
Charlie Brooker, yeah. So this is what it essentially is. It's fully authorised. It's a recreation, if you look at it, of the original rubber-keyed ZX Spectrum. The keyboard is the same kind of dead flesh feel, I think they call it.
So this isn't the Vega that we talked about last week, which was...
The Vega's like, it's got 3 keys on, hasn't it, the Vega? That's
it's a really kind of mini Spectrum.
Yeah. No, this is different. This is essentially what it is a Bluetooth keyboard.
Oh.
That looks like an original Spectrum.
Can there be that many Spectrum fans?
Well, the way this works, this has been selling really well. Didn't you say in Amazon they're selling one every 5 minutes?
Wow.
Or something. That's the article you sent
crazy.
me. But yeah, it's pretty cheap. You can buy this, and what it does, it hooks up to, you can have your tablet there, for example, and you can then have this little Spectrum recreation in front of it. Use the tablet as like a screen, and then control it from the keyboard. It's like having a portable ZX Spectrum.
So you could be sitting on the train with your iPad, and then you whip out this Spectrum as a keyboard. That's great.
Play Manic Miner, on the train. So
no wonder they've been selling.
Yeah, but it's really cool. And they've actually, there's a video on YouTube with the guy who originally designed the rubber-keyed Spectrum. And he gives his verdict on what he thinks of it, and he goes, look at it, you can barely tell it apart, It's,
it's around £90 here on eBay.
Yeah, so
it must be good as well, because it's got a very high rating.
Now, essentially, like I said, it's a Bluetooth keyboard that, it links to an iOS or Android app. They do supply quite a lot of games with it when you buy it as well that you can download straight away. But also, I mean, the fact that it's a Bluetooth keyboard, it's an open platform as well. I presume you could play, Grand Theft Auto 5 using it if you wanted to.
Yeah, you probably could. That's crazy. Just looking at the back, it's got, USB powered and all the kind of modern stuff.
So obviously, if you're interested, all the notes will be in the podcast show notes, as we do every week. Now, the next one's been a pretty big deal in the Amiga scene, hasn't it?
Oh, yeah. We're old Amiga guys, so, you'll hear a lot about Amiga in this podcast, but this is a kind of a very important story. Now, a few years ago, I'd heard that there was a leak of the source code of OS 3.1.
This is the Amiga operating system, isn't it? Yeah.
Which has always been closed, which is actually... A lot of people have said this has actually prevented development of the operating system because it's been closed, they haven't licensed it, and it's been kept within companies. So it's up to those companies to kind of deliver the OS. When people have tried to contribute, they can't. And this is what's happened is the source code's basically been leaked, which is very interesting because Hyperion did a statement on it this week, and Hyperion are the current owners of OS 3.1 source code.
They're the ones who make OS 4 as well, aren't they?
Yeah, which is based on OS 3.1 code as well. And they're not happy.
No.
They're saying this is an infringement of their copyright, which it is, and not to distribute it. Now, I've heard a lot of things about the distribution of it, and I've heard that there's basically a lot of code in there, the source code, that was going for later Amiga projects. So I think it might be an interesting document for that. But I don't know, Dan, what do you think? Do you think they'll be able to do anything with it, or a new free version of the OS?
Well, this actual distribution has been around for a long time.
Yeah, this is what I thought. It was 2 years or 3 years ago.
This was in the late 90s. This was on Usenet back then. I think because, when OS 3.9 came out, that kind of came out, if you're not familiar with the Amiga scene, there was. It was developed by a third-party company, officially licensed back in
Partner,
2000, wasn't it? It came out. And there was a guy who basically had a job of taking, when Commodore went bankrupt, ESCOM were the company that took over. They got all of the, the backup tapes from Commodore servers. And the source code was on there. And there's a guy whose job it was, Olaf his name is, no relation to the snowman from Frozen, but it was his job to clean up the source code ready for OS 3.5 and 3.9. Okay. And he's commented on the forum saying this is not the source code that he got from ESCOM. This is actually an earlier one that came from Commodore. By the looks of it. So by the looks of what happened here is someone who's working for Commodore in like the last couple of weeks before they went under did a copy of this off the servers on a tape, buggered off with it, and then uploaded it somewhere. I think this was dates from about 94, 95.
It's kind of interesting that people even bother to leak these things. No,
I think, obviously the Amiga's operating system is legendary, and the fact that, this code here is 22 years old now. And really, I understand that there's copyright reasons and all that, but this archive, hands up, I've got it. I've had a look through it, and there is some interesting stuff there, but it's incomplete. So it's not like you can compile it, and apparently the kit that you need to compile this is like a very specific 1980s Sun workstation that Commodore ran.
Some strange model. Or,
it's got like some Unix compiler and all that. So not the kind of stuff you can do in like UAE or anything like that. So really, no one's going to do anything with it. It's purely...
It's kind of like they're protecting their own interests.
But it hasn't gone down well on the forums. I think you look at Hyperion released a statement.
I don't think Hyperion's statement's gone down well because essentially it's saying, stop doing this, and it's kind of knocking on the classic people a bit. And, they're only interested in it for the historical reasons. They're not going to recreate the OS. That's already been done. That's Morphos and Aros, so...
And I think a lot of the guys who love the old, like, Amiga 500 and 1200 haven't got a lot of interest in the PowerPC and OS4 stuff, so...
Well, that's what they say, that the value that is left in Amiga is the patents.
Yeah.
People...
Even a lot of those have expired now as well.
Well, people said that the ESCOM... bought the Amiga said that they could have the right click or the left click on the mouse, because of that patent. There was seen in the eyes of the business people as a valuable thing, I guess. So they've got to defend it. And it's their one product that they make, isn't it, Hyperion? So,
I can understand from both sides, but I've looked through the source code and there is like some interesting stuff in there. Do you remember a project called the CD-1200?
Yes.
And that was a CD-ROM drive for the Amiga 1200.
Yes.
In the source code, there's all the drivers and everything for it, and there's comments talking about how it boots and all that. There's text documents and...
how it actually could have worked,
Yeah, and there's also a CD32 emulator on there, like the source code, for developers and stuff like that.
God.
So there's some interesting stuff in there. Obviously, we won't be providing links.
No, because there was some interesting... I remember talking to RJ Michael, and he said that the Atari Lynx was all developed in a virtual machine on the Amiga.
Oh, really?
So,
I think the Amiga OS is developed on Sun Systems, like I said. So, So, interesting, but I think that's kind of a debate that will rage forever in the Amiga scene.
We'll probably be going on about this every week. It's like these kind of stories with Amiga, they last for years and they get more and more controversial. So,
well, you mentioned RJ Michael. He was obviously after the Amiga. What was his next big project? The 3DO company?
Oh, yes, that was a 3DO. And I've found a little story for Dan that he might find interesting because he's got a 3DO himself.
I've got two, actually.
Yeah, there you go, two different versions. And if you want to see the worst version of Doom ever in history, they have posted a picture. Rebecca Heinemann.
Yeah, she was a coder, wasn't she? Yeah.
The coder, she's done a lot of videos on MatChat as well, I remember. And she's released a video of the FMV of Doom.
Oh, God.
And my God.
Now, for context, obviously this was back in like 94, I think it was, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And it was that time when, CD-ROM technology was really just taking off and everyone used it for full motion video intros, didn't they, on their games? But looking at this, it looks like a bad B movie, doesn't it? It
looks really bad, and they've kind of got the green screen in the background. And I remember Rebecca Heinemann. She was from Bard's Tale.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, her port of Doom is generally considered to be one of the worst ports of Doom. On the 3DO, it runs at about like 10 frames a second.
Really?
It runs really badly. But she also released, there's a video of it actually playing on YouTube, and Rebecca's commented on it, saying that, yeah, she admits it's a really crap version, but apparently she did it in like a couple of weeks.
Okay.
And she was just really, really limited time constraints. And, you know, basically the software house, right, just rush it out, get it out there now. We need it out on the market before she had time to optimize it and tidy it up.
You can't really mess up Doom as well.
Well, yeah, it's one of those games, isn't it? You know, and yeah, so historically, I think now the 3DO version is considered even worse because you've got this full motion video.
Maybe they should find the intro and slap it on just to give it the.
If you can't make it good, make it even worse.
Yeah, make the absolute rubbish version of it.
And this is another thing that's been uncovered recently. Then, ID Software, obviously, you know, were behind Doom. Did you know they were responsible for porting Super Mario Bros. 3 to the PC?
Yes. Super Mario Brothers. This was initially John Carmack and John Romero's idea. Was we want to show scrolling on the PC, and the only way we can show scrolling is by putting a really popular game on and showing all those kind of naysayers that say the PC wasn't able to do it. So they did a full port of Super Mario's 3, like a full port, and then sent it to Nintendo. That was the first ID software product, and Nintendo rejected them.
See, most people think like Commander Keen for the first game that really showed off, you know, what you could do with, you know, the old school
Well,
PC,
that's what this, the scrolling in this port was actually used on Commander Keen later. That was, you know, the influence of it.
Now, they've uploaded a video so you can watch it. What do you think? Have you watched the video?
Yeah, it looks really good.
It does.
The flying's not so good on it with the raccoon tail, but it's actually quite funny because he just kind of goes in a mad angle.
And it's EGA graphics, isn't it?
Yeah.
And, you know, you watch this and you can tell it's an early product, and, you know, there's no music or anything like that, and the sound effects are all PC speaker based.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's impressive looking at that. 'Cause I remember I had friends that had, you know, DOS PCs like in the early 90s, and they'd look at the Amiga where their jaw dropped, you know, what it could do.
Yeah.
And this is actually a very faithful port. You know, it looks as good as it did on the NES, I think.
No, it's very smooth as well. It's very playable, you know.
Should we talk about a new Amiga game now?
Oh, yes. Let's talk about a new Amiga game.
Now, this is
actually quite rare. We never usually talk about new Amiga games.
Especially ones that are platform exclusive to the Amiga as well.
And is this modern Amiga or old? Classic?
This is classic Amigas.
Wow.
Yeah,
okay.
So this is a game that will
Even
run
more rare.
on any Amiga with an 020 CPU and at least 1 megabyte of memory. So we're talking like, you know, this would run on a stock Amiga 1200 or a CD32. And it's a game that I originally thought it was meant to be called Tanks Fury.
Okay.
But if you look at spelled Furry.
Tanks Furry.
I thought Tanks Furry. But the developer's been talking on some of the forums, and he's been like, you know, but the tanks are really cute and stuff, so I think it is actually meant to be Tanks Furry.
Okay. Looking at it now, it looks absolutely amazing.
So basically what it's going to be, it's a game that comes out in February, so next month it's going to be out, and Pixel Nation have done this amazing animated video.
Oh, at the beginning, yes.
A trailer, yeah. And the game itself looks loads of fun. You basically it's a 4-player game.
Yeah.
And it's just like a tank war game where you destroy each other, but you got some, like, you know, really cool elements in the map, like you go through a tunnel and come out the other side. And
if you've seen a game called Retro Rampage, which was recently done, which was kind of released for 486 PCs and all the older formats, it's kind of got that same comical style. And it looks like it would have been an absolute smash hit if it was out in, say, 93 or 94.
Well, I've been reading a bit how they made it as well. It's, you know, pure assembly. It's made in as well, fully optimized for the Amiga. And it's going to be offered as a free download, so anyone can get it. And also they're going to have a commercial release as well, where it comes boxed with a CD-ROM that the same will probably be on a CD32.
So it's already 2016 and we're already getting one brand new game.
And also it'll have some floppy disk labels in there as well if you want to make your own ADFs and put them on discs. So,
excellent.
Yeah, it's awesome.
You get me excited now. I mean, we need to do a Tanks Furry review.
But looking at this, the fact that as well, you know, it's a 4-player game, and I don't know about you, but growing up with an Amiga and my friends around, the most exciting Amiga memories are sitting there having 2 joysticks or 2 control pads, having your mates around, having tournaments.
To me, that's multiplayer gaming. You know, everyone talks about online gaming. It's totally different. You know, nothing beats having your mates around or playing, you know, Mortal Kombat or Micro Machines. It's great.
Well, this, you know, the fact that it's 4 players as well, you can have, you know, I'd imagine you'd probably need some kind of those parallel interfaces you can get with more ports on to do that. But, or even system link to Amigas, I guess.
Some big fat extension.
So the game's called Tanks Fury. We'll pop a link in the show notes as well, but definitely want to support, like I said, completely free. We'll run on an Amiga 1200 CD32, and there'll be a commercial release as well. I've heard a few guys on the forums have been saying, why don't you put a download link or a donate link on the free version, if people want to say thank you.
I would pay for that.
Absolutely. I'll be buying the commercial release.
And next up, we have friends of yours, Dan, actually, the guys that make the EverDrive.
Cricks.
Yes, they are releasing the EverDrive for the Game Boy Advance.
Now, for people who don't know what an EverDrive is...
Yeah, it's kind of a cart that you could stick an SD card in that will preload up all the files you've put on there and load it just like the original cart, But it's so big you can have pretty much every single game. So you could have your Game Boy Advance, every single game in a cart, bam, select the game, go. It's great.
Eventually, they're supporting more and more platforms. I really want them to do an Atari Jaguar one, though.
Oh, yeah.
That's the one platform that they haven't done yet. But
do you think it's because the carts are very oddly shaped, or maybe?
Well, I think...
Or the hardware's...
They do offer just bare board EverDrive, so you can actually make your own carts around it. But, you've got to basically dismantle an old cart, a crap game or something, and use that. But a lot of people have been asking him to do one, but he basically doesn't think there's enough demand for the Jag.
They're quite expensive, aren't they, as well?
They are. I mean, props to the guys from Retro Towers who've actually given me a few to review on my YouTube channel. Yeah. I've got them for the N64. I've got one for my Sega Mega Drive, NES, SNES, pretty much all of my cart-based systems apart from the Jag. I've got EverDrives for. And for someone like me, who I'm not really a game collector, I don't care about having all the original games on the shelf and stuff like that, but I do like to play in the original systems with the original control pad. And this, an EverDrive, it's not emulation.
No, I'm just looking now on retrotowers.co.uk, which is the site, and, they've got the 64. Yeah, they've got the SNES one, the NES, the Game Boy. It's pretty much Vextrex, it's like every system
apart from
much.
The Jag.
Yeah, apart from the Jag.
But so what you essentially do is you download all the ROMs off the internet, obviously providing that you own the original games and are not infringing copyright, and then you dump them onto an SD card, and then you basically get this menu where you select with your control pad, press start, it loads it into the flash memory of the cart, and then as far as the system's concerned, you've got an original cartridge in there.
And you're looking here and you're looking and it's £130 for the EverDrive for the N64. Now, £130 is expensive, but for every single game on one cart that's going to play perfectly, yeah, I think that's worth it.
There are N64 games that go for double that.
Yeah, exactly. And also if you're a games collector and you don't want to wreck your games, you can just have this one cart and leave everything sealed in.
Well, I've got a friend who does that. Yeah, basically, he's got all his original games at his dad's place, and he doesn't want to, use them too much. He's a bit of a, pristine collector and stuff. Yeah. But he has EverDrives for all his systems, and for the daily grind of just playing them and stuff, so you don't wear out your original cartridges and stuff. So I think they're amazing.
Spill tea on your original copy of a game or something.
But, I often get comments in my YouTube video, people saying, I'm not paying that much for 130 quid, it's a rip-off. But like you said, how much would it cost if you were to buy the entire N64 library?
Or even if you were to get CD-ROMs and just burn it, and then the bandwidth, and, all of this is so complex. It's just a very nice solution.
But also open it up a bit more as well, like the one that you get for the Mega Drive. Do you remember on the Mega Drive there was that... I think it was called a master base adapter, so you could play Sega Master System games. Well, actually, inside the Mega Drive, all the hardware of the Master System's in there already.
Yeah.
So all that Power Base does is adapt the pins. But with the EverDrive, you can download and play Master System games straight on the Mega Drive.
That's crazy.
Yeah, without any emulation or anything.
But also, I guess you can have trainers on there. You can have homebrew games. You can have versions, imports and stuff that didn't come out in the country, different regions.
Well, there have been some kind of unreleased games have been leaked. Like for example, Putty Squad. That's just come out on the Mega Drive. They've just released it last month, so you can now download that if you've got an EverDrive.
We could talk about that for a second. If you guys don't know about Putty Squad, it was a game by System 3. This was Putty was the original game, which was you're a kind of ball of putty that can absorb people, and you could absorb other putties and kind of get more skills. But this game was notoriously not released for a long time, wasn't it? And they said I think it was a year ago, that we've actually got the original master disc, and everyone didn't believe them. I know, Dan, you were doubting it a lot.
Oh, well, I remember. I mean, the original Putty game, I loved that. I had it when I was a kid. And then, Putty Squad was the sequel. It did actually come out on the Super Nintendo, but I think that was the only platform they released it on, and there was Mega Drive, a Mega Drive version and an Amiga version. But we're talking, I think it was about like late 94, 95, and obviously, I
think there was a demo version that was released for the Amiga. That
on a couple of magazines had it.
Yeah.
And a few magazines back then actually reviewed the full game. Now this, if you look on English Amiga board, there are threads that date back to 99, 2000, people saying, Amiga Power and Amiga Format reviewed it, so there must be an original out there. And there was pretty much a 15-year hunt for this source code. Loads of people saying, it's never going to happen, never going to happen, it doesn't exist. And then, out of the blue, I think it was Christmas before last, wasn't it?
It was on a DAT tape, wasn't it?
Is that how they found it? Yeah,
yeah, it was on a DAT tape. They found a DAT tape, and it was actually stored on that. But they'd also kind of released a new version of Putty Squad, a remake.
Yeah.
So they managed to, whilst releasing the remake, put the original one in.
That was good timing, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was really good timing that they happened to find it.
But yeah, I got it on the PS4 because I wanted to play the Amiga version for so long, and the fact that they gave it away as like a Christmas gift, and I'd just got a PS4 then.
Yeah.
And I thought, to support them and say thank you. The PS4 version was only about 15 quid.
Yeah.
So I thought I'll buy that as a thank you to them. Actually, the PS4 version is really good, so...
Have a go on
it's out on the Mega Drive now as well, though, so if you're interested.
That nicely brings us on to remakes, which is one thing that we're covering recently, which is kind of remakes of classic games that they're doing at the moment. And we've talked about Final Fantasy VII, but there's also Shenmue 3, which is going to be coming along.
Another game that people thought would never happen.
Yeah, and a Dreamcast, amazingly big title, wasn't it?
That probably the best game at number 2, especially I love on the Dreamcast.
Yeah, it was a very big adventure one. And also Banjo Kazooie, they've got the spiritual successor, which is, let me try and say this, Yoke Yali. But they basically generated £2 million to fund that on Kickstarter.
Kickstarter's the way to do it now, though, isn't it? It proves the demand's there for, these developers who before would have to put something out and kind of, rely on gut feeling and a bit of market research. And if it didn't work, they'd lose all the money with Kickstarter.
But also I've noticed a lot of companies are now just putting it up on Kickstarter initially, seeing if they get the funding. If they don't get the funding, they just, we'll do it anyway. So they kind of had the plans in place. They just thought they'd give Kickstarter a go.
But not to kind of, piss on anyone's chips, as the old expression goes. But there's an Amiga game at the moment that I've seen on Kickstarter, and it's getting quite a bit of support, actually. But it's essentially, it looks pretty unfinished at the moment. It's actually an Amos game.
Oh, is this that Dreams of... Rowan.
Rowan, that's the one. I've seen it. I mean, I've got to say, it's great that someone's making a new Amiga game. From what I've seen, it doesn't look... It kind of looks... Do you remember Amiga Format magazine? Mm-hmm. Do you remember they had a CD-ROM and you'd submit, like...
the Amiga AFCD.
They do like Game of the Month where people write little games in Amos.
Yeah,
and
PD games.
It looks a bit like a PD game, to be fair. And then obviously we talked about that Tank's Furry game before, which actually looks like a proper commercial release, and they're giving that one away for free. I mean, obviously it's down to every developer if they want to charge for their project or not, but that is getting some support on there at the moment. But it kind of seems like a lot of fans will just kind of bang anything.
I've just realised something that's really actually quite amazing. The people that have made the Indigo are Amiga people. They are the ARES people.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah,
okay.
I've just looked. It says by ARES computer. So ARES, for years they've been making these kind of boxes for emulation that have been quiet, and they've never really got much attention. So I'm quite pleased about this Indigo. But I'm just looking at Kickstarter at the moment, and pretty much every Amiga project's been funded to massive amounts. Like, it seems to be...
It kind of proves there is still a market there as well for these...
for these old systems. And these definitely.
How many consoles and computers would you say you have?
Oh, I think I've probably got 12 at the last count because I'm just moving house at the moment. So
I think we did a count before Christmas. I think I've got about, it's up in the 50s, about 54, 55.
Oh my God, Dan. How does your flat cope?
Well, that's the thing. We had a big clean out over Christmas, and literally out of my home office, I've got to keep all my stuff in there.
Yeah.
So I don't piss the missus off too much. And I got 5 black bags
out
of there, just all crappy graphics cards and wires and stuff, and just and I've traded in a load of old, because I've got EverDrive, as I said, for all my systems and that now. I've actually traded a load of cartridges in today. But I was actually reading a topic on Lemon 64, which is a website about the Commodore 64. And they've got a debate going at the moment. Is it collecting or is it hoarding?
This is a good one, because I'm, as I said, just moving out, and I'm wanting to put my collection in a dedicated computer room. But,
So there'll be more room.
So there'll be more room, but I've got to get rid of all the bits and bobs that I've hated. So I've, been tirelessly listing stuff on eBay. Because I don't want to get trapped in the hoarding area, or I want to be a collector. So.
Now, I'll admit, I don't know when you cross the line, though. I mean, I think I look online and there are guys that have got, like, you see pictures and they've got about 40 Amiga 500s on a shelf.
Yeah, or like, 60 Sega Dreamcasts in original boxes. And I don't know, if you're not a company and not selling it, what's the point? Like, I personally think if they're running, yeah, that's fine. But if they're sitting there stored up like a kind of warehouse of obsolescence,
and in a way, it's sad as well, because there are people that would play those machines and would like to own one.
Yeah, and it's interesting, because what are these people hoarding them for? Eventually, all the people that would be interested in that machine will probably die, and there'll be a museum that will be interested in it, and that's about it. So it can't be for profit.
See, like I said before, I've got about 50 odd systems, but they're all kind of machines that I've only got one of each, mainly, apart from the 3DO and the Amiga Cd32.
Yeah.
Which for some reason I've got two of each. Yeah, basically I've only got one of each system, and I do kind of use them all, they're not all set up at the same time.
Yeah, and you rotate them, you bring out different ones and stuff.
Yeah, I'll be like, I fancy playing a Sega Saturn game this weekend, so we'll get the Saturn set up in front of the TV for, a couple of days, and that's generally the way I do it. And when they're not, they're kind of packed away and hidden away, and they don't look too obtrusive, I don't think. But
that's it. But you've never been a collector, Dan. I find you're a kind of guy that likes to play with the machines, fiddle with the hardware. You're more of a hardware guy.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And a lot of it is kind of stuff that I wanted as a kid that I couldn't afford then. And now when you're an adult and the prices have gone down, you've got a job and all that. My Amiga 4000 I bought like last year or year before last, as it was now. I remember reading about the Amiga 4000 when it first came out in in Amiga format, and I think, that looks. I had Amiga 500 at home at the time. Then I saw the price; it was like £2,000 or £3,000. I was like, never going to happen. Then it took 20 years when I eventually got one. What I mean? But,
well, that's the same with me. I'm currently started a CD-32 collection to get every single game boxed. Because I never had one. And I wanted one, and I wanted every game. So it's interesting. Yeah.
I think there is a fine line, though, between collecting and hoarding. Love to get some thoughts as well. If you've got an opinion on is it collecting or hoarding? We'd like to know how many.
Yeah, if you have got a lot of machines and you can tell us what you're doing with them, that'd be great.
Well, we do post the show on SoundCloud every week as well, and it's really cool because you can actually comment on the timeline. We're talking about stuff. So
yeah, that's worked quite well actually, and we've got some good comments coming in at the moment.
And the final topic this week, then, talking about, I mentioned before, we're on Lemon 64. I don't know how you pronounce this. I think it's Cassiopei, the Cassiopei C64 adapter.
Yeah, Cassiopei.
Cassiopei. So what this essentially is it's a cassette tape interface for the Commodore 64 that plugs into the cassette port, and it's mainly used for loading tape files. So rather than having, your old cassette player, you load your files off that. And as far as the Commodore 64 assumes, it's loading off original tapes.
Well, also you can do that with an MP3, can't you? So you can get an iPod and just stick it in with the data files, and
if you've got an audio interface into it. But this thing, I think it's about four or five times the speed of the original cassette player.
Okay.
But also it's got this really cool kind of GPIO port on the back as well that you can hack other projects into and stuff. As guys have made like USB ports and all that. But this video is a couple of years old. The reason that I'm talking about it now is it actually got featured on one of the Commodore sites as kind of a spotlight of the week. I think it was on Commodore Plus 4 World they were talking about it. And there's a guy who's posted a video. He runs his home automation off a Commodore 64 and a Cassiopei.
That's amazing. That is really good.
He's got his C64 set up in his bedroom. It's all linked kind of, via infrared or RF. So he posts a video of him sleeping, and he shows a display of his Commodore 64, and there's a countdown, and then it triggers his, an MP3 to play across the room on an MP3 player. It turns on his lights, fires a signal into the kitchen, the toaster starts coming on, and starts frying his breakfast and all that. But
that's excellent.
And then you get this raspy kind of, SID chip generated Commodore 64 voice going, "Time to wake up."
It's really good.
He's living the dream, man.
Living the dream. home automation dream. He could have done that.
I saw that and I thought, my 64 is just sitting there unused at the moment. So I said to my girlfriend, I thought, I've got a little project. She goes, can you do that one of those Raspberry Pi things? I'm like, yeah, but nowhere near as much fun. Come on.
Yeah, you know. That'll be it. You want the girlfriend to be waking up terrified with, wake up, this is C64. You know?
Yeah, like the toaster is set on fire in the other room or something.
Yeah,
So,
that'll be it.
one last thing to talk about, Ravi?
Yeah, we're on the C64, and there was a thing called the C64 Orchestra, which was a full orchestra recreating C64 tunes, and this was involving Rob Hubbard, and on the video as well, we actually have Alistair Brimble, who was
our guest last week,
yeah. And orchestras and music, old school game music, they've just done The Legend of Zelda, Symphony of the Goddess, and it's got a performance from the London Royal Philharmonic Orchestra.
Wow.
And they're going to be doing Zelda tunes.
It's got a proper full performance.
Yeah,
wow,
that you can actually go and see in London.
That's amazing, though, isn't it? Video games are art these days, though, aren't they? And it's an art form, so...
Yeah, you know, and this is celebrating video game music. You know, I think it doesn't get that much recognition usually, and it's good to see high-end orchestras and, you know, kind of...
doing 8-bit songs, you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. I remember seeing them doing Monty on the Run.
Oh, wow.
That's particularly good, yeah.
Amazing. Well, listen, guys, thank you so much for checking out episode 2 of the Retro Hour. You can download the show every week from SoundCloud. Just search for the Retro Hour or our website, theretrohour.com. And very soon we're going to be on the Google Play Store as well, although I tried to upload it there. It's only for America at the moment, apparently.
Oh, so, yeah, America get it first.
Exactly.
Just like Netflix.
Whenever Google roll that out, we'll be on there as well. But obviously, you know, keep an eye out. Every Friday, the show is going to be out as a little gift to you before the weekend. And keep it here because next we're going to have a fascinating talk to Jon Hare from Sensible Software. And we will catch you next week.
Yeah, catch you next week, guys.
Never been so much fun. 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 Go to your brother, kill him with your gun, leave him lying in his uniform, dying in the sun.
You're listening to the Retro Hour, and it's time for this week's special guest. Now, I've got to say, you know, personally, as someone who grew up playing the Commodore Amiga, games like Sensible Soccer, Cannon Fodder, really, really fond memories of those games. And we're really proud to have on the show Jon Hare, formerly of Sensible Software. So we'll start right at the beginning, Jon. What first got you into gaming?
What got me into games? I started working in games when I was about 18 or 19, and I didn't have a job. I was playing in a band with a friend of mine, an old school friend, and he started to teach himself to program, and neither of us had proper jobs. I worked at Asda, I don't really count that. He managed to get a programming contract with somebody. He was stuck on some graphics for a game on the ZX81 he was doing, and I helped him out, and they liked my work and offered me a job. And about a year later, a year of working sort of contract work for this small company in Basildon in Essex, we set up our own company, which was Sensible Software.
Was the ZX81 your first platform you worked on then, was it?
Very first, but I didn't do very much. I did a few little graphics, but then I did a few bits and bobs of graphics for different games like Trivial Pursuit and Firefox on Spectrum. I worked on an early but unpublished version of International Karate. Did some myself and Chris did a game called Twister. My partner Chris Yates did a game called Twister, which was my first game on the Spectrum, with me and him working together as a two. And then we set Sensible up, did Parallax, then Whizball, and then Shoot Up Construction Game, Micro Soccer, etc., etc.
Working on a platform like the ZX81, though, that must have been pretty challenging doing graphics and sound on that.
Actually, in a lot of ways, those early platforms were much easier because there were less decisions and options. You only had what they gave you. Certainly programming-wise, things were a lot easier. Quite closed systems, so you could spend a lot more time focusing on the gameplay rather than the technical side. Interestingly, we probably, with the help of tools like Unity, we're back nearer to where we were then, now. There was a long period in the middle with consoles where you spent all your focus working on making the 3D work, and for the last 25% of the work was making the game, which as a game designer, which I'm not a programmer, meant that I spent a lot of time very bored and frustrated waiting for everyone to get the graphics to display so I could do my work.
You know, obviously looking back at like the 8 and 16-bit days, back then it was really possible to make, you know, a commercial game with just a couple of people. Now you often need like movie studio size development teams. Did you find it was easier to work back then?
Oh, well, it's very interesting. I mean, I mean, I've been doing this 30 years, right? So I can see a lot of different eras in my mind. Chris and I started off with just a 2-man team. We added a third guy, then a fourth, fifth. We got up to 6. So our best team size was 6, and we'd be doing 2 or 3 games at once. But that's when we did like Sensible Soccer, Cannon Fodder, Megalomania, WizKid. All those games came from that 6-man team. But we did 2 games at a time, so the teams were still only 2 or 3 people, 2 or 3 core people per game, and then you'd have Richard Joseph doing sound with us, a guy called Mike Hammond did a lot of football data, and various other people you'd have coming. When we got up to Sensible Soccer 98, our 3D football game, the team went up a bit further to about 6 or 7 people. Sex and Drugs and Rock and Roll was about 12 or 13, maybe as high as 15. That never came out, obviously.
Yeah.
And then you go on to some of the big console teams have just been getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Now they're in the hundreds, as we know. But depends on what platforms you're looking at. On the mobile side, I've been working a lot in mobile recently. Again, the team sizes have been back to similar kind of sizes that we had in the Amiga or early console eras. It was the early 3D era that really took the manpower programming wise, and now a lot of manpower is spent on art and on things like customer support and all that kind of stuff. I think now you've got a vast range of platforms. You can make a game if you look at Sam Barlow, who did Her Story, that's virtually a one-man game. Mm-hmm. Or you've got Assassin's Creed, which is, 500 people, who knows.
Now, getting back to Sensible, one question I often see asked on the forums is, why was it called Sensible Soccer, not like, Sensible Football or something?
Our Sensible Soccer was because we were Sensible Software, and it kind of went. Yeah. It was just a shameless way of putting our name out there, I think. Actually, we did a game called Microprose Soccer in 1988.
I remember that, yeah.
And we actually wanted to call that Sensible Soccer, but Microprose, who offered us quite a lot of money at the time, said they wanted to be called Microprose Soccer, so we said okay and took the money.
Okay.
And when we came to do Sensible Soccer, we had a very good offer from Virgin on the table as well. But they wanted to call the game Virgin Soccer, and we said, you know what? No, we want to call it Sensible Soccer, please. Yeah. That's what happened. So.
Okay. That sounds really good, because I remember one kind of lasting legacy of Sensible Soccer was that people were still updating it, religiously every year up to the late 2000s. They still are. Yeah. And it was you'd always get in Amiga format these updated discs, or the latest rosters.
Are you ever surprised at the legacy of Sensible Soccer?
Not really. I think at the time it came out, it was kind of groundbreaking. I think Kickoff was very good. Kickoff 2 particularly was very good before we came out. But no, I think the timing was right. I think it was a great, very playable game. The timing was right for it, and I think when we put SWAS out, we really nailed it. We took it up another level. Mm-hmm. There's so many teams and such a realistic,
and the whole management on there was immense as well. And
people that love Sensi Soccer back in the day will be really interested in this new project you've been working on that's been a Kickstarter, Sociable Soccer.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's very much what we want to do with Sociable Soccer, is build another football franchise. So the first release will be more like Sensible Soccer in content with the online play added, and then when we get to the second or third release, we'll hopefully be able to have the kind of like SWAS style career elements and transfer market and that. But people must remember that took 3 years to make.
Yep.
At the moment, we're looking at 5 platforms. That ranges right from iOS, Android, up to PC, PS4, and Xbox One. They're the 5 platforms we're looking at. And the real challenges are, okay, you've got a core, very playable, very fast football game, but that can be that can be treated in different ways. At the moment, we've got it working on PC really well. The basic gameplay I'm talking about now, not all the menus and everything like that, or it's not working online at the moment, but the basic player versus player PC gameplay, the gameplay is quite solid. And it's also working relatively well on iPad at the moment with against some basic AI. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of where we are now, and then we're going to add in more sophisticated AI. This is how a game works. So you start with the football playing part, which is the key part, which is great. But then how do you treat that? So around Sociable Soccer, for example, we're wrapping 600 different teams, 400 club teams, 200 national teams, and a whole bunch of custom sides and silly things like this. Loads of online leagues for clubs, for countries, for essentially fantasy kind of clans. So you've got online to deal with 5 platforms. It's a quick sentence to say. It's a colossal amount of work to make it work properly, to make it run fast,
Getting them to talk to each other as well, I guess. That's,
it's just a nightmare. In fact, the programmers have said we don't want to try with the first release to make Android talk to Xbox One, please. Can we not do that for first release? That's one of the few things they've said to me. If we want this out kind of this time next year, you can't do that quick. You've got to do it stage by stage. So.
Well, looking back as well, John, obviously, Sensible was, you had other big hits like Cannon Fodder, for example, was one of my favourite games on the Amiga.
Uh-huh.
And I always found that, if you actually played Cannon Fodder, it had quite a strong anti-war message. But I remember there's a lot of papers were accusing the game of promoting war and getting outraged of it. How did you feel about all that back then?
At the time, we were just trying to get the game finished off when that kicked off. I think that in those times, the media had just woken up to games existing. And didn't really like it and wanted to condemn what we were doing. And we're very quick to jump on the bandwagon of games being violent and being antisocial and bad things in general. I think it was a pity for them they didn't bother to look at Cannon Fodder as a game. Mm-hmm. They picked on the wrong game, basically.
I think they saw you as more kind of edgy and controversial, and I kind of saw you as more Monty Python kind of parody,
I think you're right. I mean, I think I'd hope that people who played our games understood where we came from. But the reason it kicked off is because we used the poppy on the cover of Cannon Fodder, the original cover. We got a letter from the Royal British Legion saying that they were going to sue us because it was their copyright.
Oh, God.
That's why it kicked off. So then they went to us being insulting young upstarts, blah, 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 blah. And it's quite funny that years later, people are saying, you know what, how many other anti-war games have there been? And they just picked on the wrong game,
Well, I think you started a lot of themes as well with Sensible. So, like the first tech tree on Megalomania, and you're saying, Cannon Fodder was an anti-war kind of game. Can you think of any other stuff that you were kind of...
We did, it was a first. Yes, I think we were very lucky because in those days, obviously, it was early days in making games and we were all making things up as we went along.
Yeah.
And I think Cannon Fodder was... Okay, we want to get in the politics of it. Virgin at the time had a big battle between Virgin US and Virgin Europe going on. Command & Conquer took a lot of the limelight. Cannon Fodder came out before Command & Conquer. And I think it's fair to say that Dune was there. I think Dune was out before Cannon Fodder was. Mm-hmm. But as RTSs go, Cannon Fodder was quite an early RTS, in my opinion.
Was it 92, was it?
93. 93. November 93. Mm-hmm. I think Sensible World of Soccer... set the benchmark for realistic sports worlds in games. Sensible World of Soccer. Sensible Soccer was the first game to have black footballers in it, or black sportsmen in it, I think. Wow. I don't know about NBA. Surely NBA had black basketball players.
You'd hope so.
I hope so. But I remember playing with like John Barnes, and he was white, for Liverpool. Not that I'm a Liverpool fan. And that didn't seem right. And we went about just making an accurate world of football. And actually, even our crazy international 3D tennis game we did a couple of years earlier, that had a totally realistic tennis world behind it. With all the players correct, all the prize money for every tournament correct, all the dates around the world. And so that was, I guess, something innovative. What else? Yeah, as you mentioned, the tech tree of Megalomania. But Megalomania also was one of the first games to have speech in it. Cannon Fodder was one of the first games to have a theme tune. I think it was the first to have a proper theme tune.
It was sung, wasn't it? Yeah, vocals. Yeah.
And what a theme tune!
Yeah.
That was me. I wrote the original tune, and Richard Joseph turned it into sounding really good. WizKid, I guess, is a one-off. I don't know if you know WizKid.
That's with the ball, isn't it? That's.
I think no one's ever made a game like WizKid before or since. It's the craziest game we made. I don't know what else we did. Shoot 'em up construction kit.
Yeah.
I remember that.
Make your own games, yeah.
Yeah, creating quite a
Making
few.
your own games. There was someone who had done a construction kit before then, I think, and I can't remember what it was called.
There was also a 3D construction kit, wasn't there?
That came afterwards. Yeah. Must have done. But there was. I think there might have been one construction kit kind of thing before it, but it was certainly quite early at that. I think that there was real room to innovate, and to me, that's the real shame of what's happening on mobile now. Is what's really happened is that we've opened the medium up via those platforms to people who aren't very creative putting apps out there. So 90% of apps are just copies and bad copies of better stuff. I mean, they have got no artistic right to exist at all. Artistically, you either do something new or you do something that's a copy of something else, but it's a better version of it. These are two acceptable things to do. So if you look at Candy Crush, It's a really, really good match 3 game. It has a right to exist for that reason. It's a better version of something done before. If you look at Monument Valley, it's a great original game. It's nice. But if you look, if you look at Flappy Bird, which is about 1/10 of a Mario level from 1984, I'm not so sure. I think Flappy Bird was a weird anomaly. But then you look at Flappy Bird copies, and there's thousands of them, and you wonder why these platform holders have so little pride in their platforms. They allow these things to exist on them. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a really big artistic problem at the moment, which is quite frankly destroying mobile as a viable platform for a lot of developers, unless they've got big money behind them.
I think a lot of people as well, that they see it as a kind of get rich, don't they? If, we can have the next version of this, and like you said, they'll put out any old crap thinking that they might get lucky with it. I think what's happened is the globalization of development in action. So if you I don't know, if you're a British developer and you're working for a year on a game on your own, and you put it out and you make £2,000 back, and you didn't earn at all anything else that year, you're likely to consider it probably a pretty bad financial year, right? If you live in Indonesia and you do the same thing, that £2,000 might go a long way to supporting you and your family. And I think kind of where we are now is that we're in a globalized world where the money made on these platforms is worth relatively little to us as Westerners. And a lot of people in other countries, the money goes further for them in these countries. An app store with no physical cost of goods, with digital transfer of money worldwide, suddenly the platforms are open to them. But also, there's more than that. A lot of countries will tell you they don't care about copying. It's fine. Mm-hmm. They copy stuff. Look at what Chinese manufacturers have been doing for the last 25 years. Copying things, doing them cheaper. The same, I spoke to a banking guy from Turkey once who told me the same about Turkey. Turkish people, they're mostly interested in trading. And if they can make something relatively cheap, which is reasonable quality, and sell bucket loads of it, great. If you ask me, I'd rather not make a game than it be bad, because it would just destroy my reputation.
Well, I think you've got a really interesting point about the globalization of gaming, because there's this recent video on African video games by Kim Justice. I'll add it in the links. And they're saying that, they haven't had these game industries at all in Africa, but recently they've started doing these mobile apps, and it's, very small, but it's enabled these guys to actually make a living, and it's kind of they've got a tiny but small emerging industry, and I guess this is being replicated around the world at the moment. Absolutely.
I've been working, for the last 10 years I've worked in Ukraine for 2 years. I worked in Turkey. I worked in Poland for the last 5 years. Recently I've only just stopped working in Poland, and there's many issues in these countries, and the main issues are to do with the understanding of what's expected in the commercial world from products, and the quality bar that people are setting themselves. So I grew up working with computer geniuses who, we were making the #1 games across Europe, and our standards were incredibly high. And then you suddenly come across people who just want to join the party.
So getting back to you, John, what would you say, looking back through your career, has been kind of your, preferred or favourite platforms to work on?
Oh, from a development point of view, the Amiga. Hands down, the Amiga. I absolutely loved it because, we had our golden years on the Amiga with Megalomania, Sensible Soccer, Cannon Fodder, WizKid. Mm-hmm. Those 4 games are 4 of my favourite games we made, and they're all Amiga. Next would be Commodore 64 with WizBall, Microprose Soccer, and Shim Up Construction Kit. But from a player point of view, the Amiga, but I've got a soft spot for a console for the N64, actually. I don't really know why. It's just, it was the first one that I really got my teeth into because I was on home computers for so long, and particularly when Mario 64 came out. Yeah. That, for me, was the wow moment of gaming, when you suddenly went, wow, look what you can do. It was the biggest eye-opener I can remember was that particular game. So, and there's so many great games on that console. So, yeah, but we've all got our own funny little timings when we first got into music, games, books, films, whatever, and we tend to have our taste. So I find it interesting that with music, my taste is really old. I'm kind of like 70s music is more what I would choose to listen to as an era, if you like. Okay. Although I listen to a wide range of music. With films, I'm very modern. I'll go back. Most of my favourite films are within the last 5 or 10 years. So it depends. And with games, I guess the peak period for me would have been maybe some games on those early consoles or PC about 15 years ago, 20 years ago, probably.
How did the downfall of Commodore affect you?
Really badly. We were the top developer on the Commodore 64 in the world when the Commodore 64 stopped. We then transitioned to the Amiga, and we were probably the top developer in the world on the Amiga when it fell apart. And we left 2D art. We left the 2D home computer world 2 years after everyone else because we were doing so well on. This year, the last year, sorry, there's been a number of Amiga 30th birthday parties kicking around, and had the pleasure to meet three of the guys who actually the three guys who made the Amiga. Mm-hmm. And these are all American guys, and they never even experienced this game thing over in the States at all. It was seen as a video toaster in the States.
Yeah, they were clueless about the success in Europe. They were kind of shocked.
They couldn't believe it. That I think it took for us to go to a couple of things and them to see that people were going, wow, we loved your games, for them to even realise the impact that it had in the gaming world. Because for them, I mean, it was a genuine surprise that someone had taken their baby, if you like, and had turned it into something totally different.
I remember the intake of breath when someone mentioned how many magazines they were selling a month, Amiga magazines in the UK, and they were just astonished. It was
it's very interesting how occasionally you can make something. If I would take that analogy from, if you take the Amiga and then say we made shoot 'em up construction kit on it, and then someone else made a game from that, you have different levels of creativity which get passed down. You don't always know where what you've made with your own vision for it, what someone else has made of it or done with it. It's quite a beautiful thing about creating things.
Well, given your success on the Amiga, what was your opinion of the Atari ST?
Honestly, without pissing a lot of people off, like a poor cousin.
Yeah.
I think that's fair.
It was a good shape for a door wedge. No, I think it was okay, and it was a reasonable format for us. It's probably our second format in the Amiga years, and then the Mega Drive as well. As I said, near the start, I'm a game designer. To me, I don't get excited about conversions of games. I know it sounds weird to people, but I'm sure J.K. Rowling wasn't that excited about the translation of Harry Potter to Portuguese. So it's kind of how I view conversions of games. I view them as damage limitation. It's a bit like where we are now, working on a game at the moment, which is basically made for trying to make it for touchscreens because it's a game made for control pads. Mm-hmm. But that's a great challenge because I know with this engine we can do it.
It's good to hear about your confidence in the engine because I've been looking at Sensible Software in the kind of end period of it when it was in the 3D, and there was a thing that you said, you need to have the technology done before the actual, game's created, and it seemed that 3D period was what caused the downfall of Sensible. It
was horrendous. It was, for example, with Sociable Soccer, I'm working with a great team in Finland who are an amalgam of several decent individuals from several very successful Finnish teams. So we've got the talent and the team, and we're also using Unity. And Unity basically means your 3D world works on multiple platforms. Yeah. So for me as a designer, that's great. I don't mind the challenge where you're working with the hardware to make it work properly from a designer's perspective, like making the touchscreen work really well. And I like those.
Yeah, because that's got kind of design elements, hasn't it?
And I've made, the last 5 years I've been working on mobile games and as well as Steam games and PS Plus games. So I've got the experience in those areas to know how those machines work now, which is very lucky for me that I can combine that with my experience on home computers and consoles and PCs. I've done one free-to-play game to date, so I think I've got a room to improve there. So that's probably, in terms of design, my area of least experience at the moment.
How do you feel about free-to-play games?
My feeling about it changes all the time. Right now, my view with Sociable Soccer is if we, at the moment we're talking to a number of different potential publishing partners, some of which would prefer free-to-play, some of which wouldn't prefer free-to-play. From the point of view of the game, it actually doesn't matter too much in terms of the actual football side of it. You're going to be playing a football game, whatever. I think for certain platforms, if people think free-to-play is better, and more importantly, if they can give us a competitive publishing deal and a nice advance, I don't mind. It doesn't really matter. I mean, the advantage of going free-to-play is you're going to hit a lot more people. A lot more people will play the game. The chance of establishing the brand alongside FIFA and Pro Evo as the leading football brands is stronger if it's free-to-play because more people will give it a chance. I know once they give it a chance, they'll love the game.
When can we expect the game out then?
Sociable Soccer will be ready around roughly, we don't know because it depends on who we publish with, is the short answer. So we're likely to either sign a multi-platform deal with one publisher or separate out the console and the mobile stuff. When we know who we're working with and we know what kind of publishing strategy they're going to put in place, we'll know roughly the completion dates. I would have thought by this time next year, all the platforms should kind of be complete or near to completion. But whether they'll be published then, you know, in the world of games, Christmas is a pretty vicious time to try and publish against established franchises. So it'll be Easter if we're late. Post-Christmas period, if we decide that the football season is too quick. Christmas if we got a fortune in marketing. And the early, the football season start next football season if development goes really well and someone wants to do that. But I doubt we'll have all 5 platforms ready for the start of the football season. That's going to be too much work in too short a period of time.
Well, I'm looking forward to trying to get Forest to the top of the league again.
I hope you can, mate. I hope you and millions of others are going to try and do the same. But I hope Norwich win. As a Norwich fan, I'm delighted at the moment because we've finally hit a bit of a rich vein of form. We had a great win over Southampton.
Nice.
And but
so
what I love about
we'll be
football
playing
is
against each
fans,
other then.
as fans, we just love to play for, you know, support and play for our club, and that's what we're trying to deliver with Sociable Soccer, is the ability for you to just go in and every day play for your club, push them up a league.
Thank you very much, and John.
Okie dokie, a pleasure, guys.
You're a gold starring superstar hero. You let your head down and play the band. You're a gold starring superstar hero.